Ford and Carroll Shelby built an empire together. The Cobra demolished Corvettes. The GT40 conquered Ferrari at Le Mans 4 years straight. The Shelby Mustangs became legends. But in 1970, after 8 years of partnership, Ford ended it. And the way they did it would haunt Shelby for decades. This is the story of how corporate America takes over when the dreamer gets too successful. How Ford gradually pushed Carroll Shelby out of his own creation. And how a Texas chicken farmer who built the fastest cars in America ended up running a safari company in Africa just to get away from Detroit. In 1962, Carroll Shelby walked into Lee Iacocca's office at Ford headquarters in Dearborn with nothing but an idea. He'd take a British AC-Ace chassis, drop in Ford's new 260 V8, and build a car that would embarrass the Corvette. Shelby had no money, a failed chicken farm, 3 kids to support, an ex-wife, and a heart condition that ended his racing career at 38. Iacocca looked at this guy in a cowboy hat and saw something Ford needed. The company was pushing their total performance campaign, trying to shake off their boring reputation. Shelby promised results in 90 days. He delivered. The first Cobra arrived at Ford headquarters exactly 90 days later. When it started beating Corvettes on SCCA tracks, Iacocca didn't have to explain to anyone in Detroit who Carroll Shelby was anymore. That handshake deal launched everything. Ford supplied engines and $25,000. Shelby supplied the vision and the wins. The agreement was simple. Ford got the glory, Shelby got to build the cars his way. By 1964, Shelby had proven the formula worked. The Cobra was dominating American road courses. The Daytona Coupe won the FIA GT Championship, the first American manufacturer to do it. Then Ford handed Shelby their failing GT40 program after another disastrous Le Mans showing. In 1965, Iacocca called Shelby with another request. The new Mustang was selling like crazy, but it had a performance image problem. Could Shelby turn it into a real sports car? Shelby American started with 1965 K-Code Mustang fastbacks shipped from Ford's San Jose plant to his facility at Los Angeles International Airport. They stripped out the back seat, added a 306 horsepower high-performance 289, installed stiffer suspension, and created the GT350. It was raw, loud, and uncomfortable. Perfect. Sales exploded. The 1965 GT350 sold 562 units. The 1966 model sold 2,380 units. For 1967, Shelby added the GT500 with the 428 Police Interceptor engine. 3,225 units sold. Ford was making serious money off Shelby's reputation. Then came 1966, and the cracks started showing. The 1967 Mustang was bigger, heavier, and required extensive fiberglass modifications for the Shelby treatment. Shelby American was set up to hand-build a few hundred GT350s per year, not manufacture thousands of cars with complex fiberglass work. Quality problems appeared immediately. Fiberglass hoods didn't fit properly. Paint wouldn't match between fiberglass and steel panels. Some parts were made from molds taken off a master body that had a twist in it, so every single hood had to be hand-fitted. Cars were being literally custom-assembled one at a time. Henry Ford would have had a heart attack watching the process. By September 1966, Ford had seen enough. They took over engineering and purchasing for the Shelby Mustangs. Shelby was still in charge, but Ford executives were now calling the shots on how cars were built. In April 1967, Ford contracted A.O. Smith Corporation in Ionia, Michigan to fix the fiberglass fitment issues. By May 1967, Ford made the decision: terminate the California operation. Shelby found out his L.A. facility was being shut down, the place where he'd built the Cobra, the Daytona Coupe, the GT350, the hangar at LAX where his team had transformed the GT40 from a failure into a Le Mans champion. Done. In August 1967, Ford moved a small engineering staff and leftover Mustangs to A.O. Smith's facility in Ionia. Shelby personnel were barely involved. The 1968 Shelby Mustangs were built by A.O. Smith under Ford's direction, not by Shelby American. The cars came from Ford's Metuchen, New Jersey plant by rail to Michigan. A.O. Smith installed the fiberglass components, the special wheels, the Shelby badges, but Carroll Shelby wasn't there. His name was on the car, but Ford was building it. Shelby American was split into 3 companies. Shelby Automotive handled Mustang production and was controlled by Ford in Michigan. Shelby Racing Company moved to Torrance, California. Shelby Parts Company went to Torrance, then Detroit. The empire had been carved up. By 1968, Ford took functional control of the Shelby Mustang design and production. The 1968 models became the best sellers, 4,450 units, but they were Ford's cars with Shelby's name, not Shelby's cars with Ford's support. The 1969 Shelby Mustangs were designed entirely in-house by Ford. Carroll Shelby had zero involvement. The cars were just styling modifications to stock Mustangs. No performance edge, no Shelby magic. They were glorified appearance packages. Some 1969 models didn't even sell. Ford had 380 leftover GT500s sitting in inventory when the 1970 model year started. Their solution? Slap on a Boss 302 chin spoiler, add hood stripes, change the VIN sequence, and call them 1970 models. Dealers could barely give them away. In the summer of 1969, Ford terminated the agreement with Carroll Shelby after building the Cobra that put Ford on the racing map, after turning the GT40 from an embarrassment into a 4-time Le Mans champion, after making the Mustang cool. After 8 years of partnership and millions in profits, Ford was done with him. The official company line said production of Shelby Mustangs ceased in 1969, and the racing agreement ended in 1970. Clean, professional, corporate. But here's what they don't put in press releases. Carroll Shelby had watched his operation get dismantled piece by piece over 3 years, watched Ford take control of engineering, watched production move to Michigan, watched his name get slapped on cars he didn't build, and in 1970, it was over. In January 1970, Carroll Shelby announced his retirement from the automotive business. He was 47 years old. At an age when most successful businessmen are building their legacy, Shelby walked away from everything he'd created. He moved to Africa, lived in Botswana, Angola, and the Central African Republic for most of the 1970s, ran a safari company, traded in diamonds, anything except build cars for Detroit. When a reporter asked him years later why he quit, Shelby said the corporate bureaucracy had taken the fun out of it. But the deeper truth was simpler. Ford had taken his creation, and he couldn't stomach watching them run it into the ground. The Shelby Mustang died with the 1970 leftovers. Ford wouldn't bring the name back until 2005, 35 years later. By then, Carroll would be 82 years old. But the betrayal wasn't over. Because when Ford terminated the agreement in 1970, they kept something that would cause decades of legal warfare: the Cobra trademarks. See, when Shelby and Ford were partners, Ford had registered several Cobra marks for use in marketing and sales. Smart business move at the time, but when they split, both sides claimed ownership of the Cobra name. For years, nobody cared. Shelby was in Africa. Ford moved on. But by the late 1970s, replica companies started building Cobra knockoffs by the hundreds. Everyone wanted a piece of the legend. In 1997, Ford and Shelby cut a deal. Ford granted Shelby an exclusive worldwide royalty-free license to use the Cobra trademarks. Shelby could build continuation Cobras. Ford kept the underlying trademark ownership, uneasy peace. But Shelby wasn't done fighting. In 2000, Shelby filed suit against Superformance International, a major replica maker. He wanted to protect the Cobra name and shape. Ford joined as a co-plaintiff. Their former marriage of convenience became a marriage of necessity to fight replica builders. The federal judge looked at the evidence and ruled in favor of Carroll Shelby, finding that the Cobra had entered public domain. Decades of replica companies using the name and shape with no enforcement meant neither Ford nor Shelby could claim exclusive rights anymore. Ford and Shelby settled quickly and asked the judge to set aside the public domain ruling. The judge agreed. They carved up the world between them and pretended the public domain issue never happened. Better to share the pie than lose it entirely. Then Shelby tried something bold. He attempted to trademark the iconic shape of the 1965 Cobra 4-27 SC. If he owned the shape itself, he could shut down the entire replica industry. Factory 5 Racing, a major kit car builder, opposed him. Their argument was simple. Carroll Shelby didn't design the Cobra's shape. AC Cars in Britain did. Shelby just dropped a Ford V8 into an AC Ace body. The styling was British, not American, and besides, thousands of replicas built since 1970 meant the shape was part of automotive culture now. In October 2010, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Court sided with Factory 5. Carroll Shelby lost his bid to trademark the Cobra shape. The car that made him famous couldn't be locked down. Too many copies existed. The legacy had escaped his control. In 1982, Carroll Shelby got a phone call from an old friend. Lee Iacocca, now running Chrysler, needed help. The company was dying. Iacocca asked Shelby to come back and build performance cars again. Shelby later said he should never have gotten back into the car business. But he couldn't turn Iacocca down. He'd always been good to me. Notice what Shelby didn't say. He didn't say Ford had been good to him. He said Iacocca had been good to him, because it was Iacocca who gave him the $25,000 back in 1962. Iacocca who trusted him with the Mustang program. And when Iacocca got fired from Ford in 1978, Shelby remembered who his real friends were. At Chrysler, Shelby built turbocharged four-cylinder pocket rockets. The Dodge Omni GLH, Goes Like Hell, the Shelby Charger, eventually the Viper. Nothing had a V8 rumble like the old days, but Shelby was building cars again on his own terms, not watching some corporate committee water down his vision. In 2003, Ford came calling again. They wanted Shelby back for the new retro Mustang design. Shelby was 80 years old. He'd spent 33 years away from Ford, had sued them multiple times, and watched them kill his name once before. But he came back. At a press conference, Shelby said, "Ford is where I am for the rest of my life." Reporters who knew Shelby's history probably smiled. Back in 1996, when he announced an Oldsmobile 5.8 would power his new Series 1 sports car, Shelby had said almost the exact same thing about GM. "We saved the best for last." That relationship died within months. Carroll Shelby had a habit of saying forever to car companies that disappointed him, but this time it actually stuck. Ford brought back the Shelby GT500 in 2007. Real Shelby Mustangs were back in production. Shelby died on May 10, 2012. At 89 years old, he'd received a heart transplant in 1990 and a kidney transplant in 1996. The heart condition that forced him to stop racing in 1960 finally caught up with him 52 years later. But he lived long enough to see his name back on Mustangs rolling off production lines. Here's what the history books won't tell you about the Ford and Shelby partnership. Ford didn't fire Shelby with a memo in 1970. The truth was worse. They systematically dismantled his operation over 4 years, took control piece by piece, pushed him to the sidelines, and then terminated the agreement when they didn't need him anymore. Death by 1,000 corporate cuts. Shelby built the Cobra with $25,000 and a handshake. He turned the GT40 from a failure into a legend. He made the Mustang cool, and when Ford got big enough and corporate enough, they took it all back. The lesson isn't that corporations are evil. The lesson is that when you build something with someone else's money, you never really own it. Shelby learned that the hard way. He spent 11 years in Africa trying to forget. He built cars for Chrysler for a decade trying to prove he didn't need Ford. He fought trademark battles in court trying to protect what was left of his legacy. And in the end, he came back to Ford anyway, because the Cobra and the Mustang were in his blood, and he couldn't let go. The partnership created legends that are still winning auctions for millions today. Original Cobras sell for $5 million and up. Shelby GT350s and GT500s are six-figure cars. The Ford GT40 that won Le Mans in 1966 sold for $11 million in 2012. But the partnership destroyed something too. It destroyed Carroll Shelby's faith that you could build cars your way and keep control of your own creation. Ford proved you couldn't, and that's why a 47-year-old man who just built the fastest cars in America decided he'd rather track diamonds in Angola than deal with Detroit's corporate bureaucracy. Carroll Shelby and Ford changed automotive history together, but the divorce left scars that lawsuits and trademark wars couldn't heal. That's the price of building legends with someone else's money.